This week on the show, both Poshmark and Mercari appear to want a redo on their recent fee changes. Etsy is making a big update in how you can ship, and eBay is making a change in how you set up promoted listings campaigns. What is up, Galaxians? Welcome to episode number 269 of the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I'm going to be your host as we wade through a bunch of reselling news this week. We have got some major things going on over at Poshmark and Mercari, as well as at Etsy, eBay, and Walmart, which maybe we can call eBay Midwest. We'll get into that in a few minutes here as well. And then I've got a pretty decent What Sold recap at the back end of the show. So let's just jump right into this reselling news.
News updates.
So first up, we've been talking about these things for, in some cases, a couple of weeks, and in some cases, 6 or 7 months now. But Poshmark this week appears to be rethinking their new fee structure, which split fees between sellers and buyers. We've been talking about it for a couple of weeks, and in that time, there have been a lot of complaints and concerns from both sides of that equation. And it appears that Poshmark has, I guess to their credit, decided to revisit that whole thing. So this article appeared over on Value Added Resource, and as always, there will be links to these in the show notes and the video description down below. Just 2 weeks after announcing a major shakeup in fee structure, Poshmark is sending cryptic messages to users saying they've heard the feedback and are working on updates to the policy to, quote, better meet your needs. The question Liz asks in the article is, will they revert back to full seller fees, or will this be something else? Poshmark announced the feedback on October 2nd, moving from the previous 20% selling fee to a split model where both the seller and the buyer pay a percentage plus a flat amount. We've covered that in some depth, so I'm not going to rehash the whole fee structure. You should be by now pretty familiar with how it works or doesn't, depending on your point of view on it. But it didn't take long for users, and we talked about it here on this show on a couple of occasions, to start doing the math and calling out that the new fee structure would actually mean that Poshmark would be collecting more fees in total for most items under $90, which caused a lot of ruckus. Some sellers, Annette was here, Excess Baggage, a couple of weeks ago, and had no problem with the fact that in some price points, Poshmark might be making more money. That's fine. These companies are in business to make money. I think the biggest concern was, number one, the way the thing was rolled out with virtually no notice, and that it was incredibly convoluted and complicated to even calculate whether or not you were making money, which made it hard for sellers to decide whether to make or accept offers, or at what dollar amount those offers even made sense, which is highlighted in this article, which continues. Backlash has ensued from both sides of the marketplace, with buyers especially upset about the lack of transparency and the fact that Poshmark is lumping the buyer protection fee in with sales tax amount at checkout, only showing the breakdown if you click on the little circle to pop up the information. I showed that in the initial episode, and again, as I harp on this show with great regularity, it is the lack of transparency which causes most problems for most of these sites, and we're going to get into that a little further when we jump into the Mercari portion of this as well. Liz said at the time, that the decision could prove to be a costly mistake for Poshmark, as many state laws specifically say tax must be stated separately from other charges. And of course, regulatory powers like the FTC and various state attorney generals are increasingly cracking down on junk fees and misleading practices. Today, some users are reporting that they're seeing messages from Poshmark indicating they are rethinking the new fee structure and will be announcing an update soon. The message read, "We want to take a moment to thank you for your valuable feedback regarding our recent fee changes. We hear your concerns and are actively reevaluating these updates to ensure they align with your needs and expectations." I'm going to read between the lines there and say, one, that they align with the legal requirements for starters, because they're in violation of tax disclosure information in several states, I'm sure, and to decipher how it is they can continue to make a little bit more money in a way that at least feels and looks a little bit more transparent and is a little easier to understand. One of the things Annette talked about on this show was why 5.99%? Why not just make it an even 6? Why implement that on sales tax, which is such a variable number that it makes it impossible to calculate again in advance what your profit might be? There has to be the flat 20% was easy. Everybody could calculate it. Everybody knew what they were doing. And as we'll get into in the next segment, buyers didn't know what the fee was, didn't care what the fee was. They didn't feel like they had to pay any particular fee in order to participate on Poshmark. Your input is crucial in shaping our platform, and we are committed to making adjustments that enhance your experience. We appreciate your patience as we work through this process, and we'll keep you updated on our progress. Again, and I don't know what level of research or seller surveys Poshmark did in advance of making that change, but it caught almost everyone by surprise. There was no indication that it was coming. And then it was just dropped in on everybody. Lo and behold, one Wednesday morning, everybody got up and there was this announcement that fees were changing. And that, again, is problematic. Here, at least they're out in front saying, hey, you know what? We may have got this wrong. We're going to look at it and potentially make a change. So there is that. Poshmark has not provided any other details at the time of recording, but sellers are discussing it over on Reddit. One said, I find it funny that it's just text when you click, but if you click any of the other banners, Poshmark makes it look pretty, and on e-flyers, the information kind of feels forced and pushed out very fast. Damage control, maybe? Oh, they must have seen a dramatic increase in sales then. This, again, has been a mixed bag. I've talked to numerous sellers, some of whom are continuing apace on Poshmark, some who say their sales are up, and others who say their sales have crashed. So as is normally the case, this change has had various effects on various different sellers, and it's really hard to pinpoint why that might be the case, but it doesn't appear to be uniform across the board, although I would imagine that net it has probably resulted in some decrease in sales over on Posh as a whole. Some commenters are encouraging others to file FTC complaints about the fees and providing links and a template to make the process as easy as possible for those who have never done so before. I knew this would happen, one said. They won't reverse course, but they'll make some minor change to make buyer fees more visible, which, again, to get them in legal compliance in many cases, would make absolute sense. Keep on reporting these bad business practices, and then there is a link, and of course that will be in the show notes and video description down below. It's not just for fraud, it's for reporting fraud, scams, and bad business practices. I just finished reporting their new policy of making buyers pay for items that were lost by USPS, orders canceled, package shows delivered months later, which is flat out illegal. Keep on reporting them. It takes just minutes. There may not be much we can do as individuals, but we can try to get it seen by the agencies that do have power. That, plus the quick about face and rushed out nature of the communications, points to Poshmark being in cover your assets mode on the legal front. And I expect, she says, at the very least, the changes they announce will include more transparency about the buyer fee and appropriately splitting it out separately from sales tax without making the buyer take any additional action or clicks in order to see it. But it's also possible, she adds, that they may make more dramatic changes, including scrapping the whole thing and going back to the old fee structure. I suppose that is possible. That could be, it's one of those things. I'm not one of those people that when you're presented with new facts and new information and you change your mind, I don't consider that to be a negative. It's not a flip-flop to me. That's how science works. It's how good business works. It's how running your personal life or business should work. When you are presented with new data that changes the game, you need to change the way you approach the game. And this is one of those cases. So if they decide to revert back to the old program, I guess I'm fine with that. My question then becomes, what was the process that they need to do that internal reevaluation? What was the process that led us to make that decision in the first place that was so obviously, in hindsight, incorrect? I think a quick discussion with buyers and sellers in advance of that, probably, and same with Mercari, which we're going to get into here in a minute, would have indicated that this was probably not the right course of action to take, and yet it happened anyway. And until you address why those kinds of mistakes get made, you continue to make them and then have to come back later and try to fix them. I'll get off my soapbox at least for a minute. I'm going to get back on it here, though. It could also be that Poshmark has reacted to recent moves by Mercari that reveal significant buyer fee aversion, leading to ongoing and persistent cart abandonment and lost sales. So let's talk about Mercari for a few moments, or maybe more than a few. Mercari tests adding buyer fees back into the item price, and then glitches on offers ensue. This one, just to forewarn you, I'm really going to go on a rant on this particular situation. In a clear sign of continued buyer aversion to the new fee structure, Mercari is testing adding fees back into the item price, but this new test appears to have triggered a glitch in pricing for sellers on offers, creating confusion on both sides of the marketplace. Mercari, as we've talked about, launched this new fee structure back in March, removing selling fees and then shifting the burden of the fee to the buyer side of the sale. The company faced pushback immediately from sellers who experienced massive sticker shock when seeing the additional fees tacked on at checkout, with some making unflattering comparisons to airline fees, or worse yet, buying tickets from Ticketmaster. Buyers were particularly taken aback because the fees were variable and could sometimes even exceed the 10% fee that had previously been applied on the seller side, raising serious concerns about transparency that forced Mercari to test showing buyer fees on the item page before checkout to stem the tide of abandoned carts. To Mercari's credit, and I've talked about this previously, they recognized that that was a problem for buyers and for themselves, that buyers were getting to the cart and then being hit with whatever it ended up being, the service fee plus the transaction fee. So in some cases, 14, 15, 16% or more, in addition to what they were paying, in addition to the shipping, and people were getting sticker shock and heading for the doors. So they did move the disclosure of that fee to the item page, so you could see it right up front and know, hey, this item is whatever, $25 plus these various fees. But that apparently has not helped things very much. Buyer fees have clearly continued to be a point of friction, preventing purchases, which prompted marketing VP David Lee to make the YouTube rounds, including on this show, which we're going to get into here in a minute. Among other things, that Mercari is going to cap the buying fee at 10%, with some items theoretically being charged far less than that. But even that doesn't seem to have moved the needle, and now Mercari appears to be desperately trying a new test to get potential buyers to pull the trigger on purchases. Several Mercari users are reporting over on Reddit that they're seeing messages popping up about a beta experience that is adding the buyer fees on top of the seller's item price to show one total item price, including fees, with shipping and tax then calculated at checkout. That part is fine. The message says, know your costs as part of a beta rollout. You're seeing prices that include item costs and fees, shipping and taxes are calculated at checkout. And you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, what this pop-up looks like. And here's another one, how it shows on the phone on the actual item listing, where you can see in this case, it says the item is $78.80, including estimated fees plus shipping. And then of course, tax is calculated at checkout. Here's my issue with this before we get into the rest of this. So when David Lee was on this show, whatever it was, 5 weeks ago or so, we had a bit of a back and forth on this whole thing, because his take, and I assume by extension Mercari's take, was that buyers were always paying these fees, not sellers. Buyers were paying them, and that sellers were baking that fee into the price, which made it opaque. It was not a transparent, that was his words, not mine. It was not transparent that the buyer was paying those fees because they were baked into the price. Here we are 5 weeks later, and Mercari is baking those fees into the price. So which is it? What was it? What is it you're actually trying to accomplish? And I David, if you're watching, Mercari, if you're watching, if you'd like to come back on the show and have this conversation, I'd love to know which was it? Is it an attempt to make more fees? Is it an attempt to get more buyers? Is it a legitimate attempt at transparency? Because this would indicate that the transparency piece of it was, how shall we say, disingenuous, maybe at best, because now they're doing the same thing that he essentially accused, is maybe a strong word, but asserted that sellers were doing, that we were calculating the fee into our selling price, when in actuality, and this is the point I made when he was here, Sellers were absorbing that selling cost as part of the cost of doing business, and buyers were not specifically aware that there was a fee. They generally, I think, understand that businesses have costs of doing business, some of which may be paying fees to these sites. But I don't feel that buyers, by and large, felt that they were paying those fees until they obviously were. And that, if you want to call it, that level of transparency has caused buyers to leave items in carts and to leave platforms altogether. Poshmark is clearly experiencing the same thing with their rollout of a program that is charging buyers for the privilege of making a purchase on their site. It is something I talked about when these things originally rolled out, is something I continue to harp on. I think if you would have asked buyers and sellers, and maybe they did, and maybe they got a bad batch, I don't know, but I feel like if you had asked a decent number of regular users of these sites how we thought this thing was going to go, we would have told you it was a non-starter. It is not. Buyers are not interested in paying an extra 5, 8, 10, 12, 15% above the price that they see listed on the item. This is not an auction house. This is not certainly a high-end auction house or an art gallery where there are buyer premiums to have the right to make a purchase. These are essentially online, large-scale garage and estate sales, for lack of a better term. It is not the buyer expectation that they would be obligated to pay these fees. And clearly, they have decided in large numbers that they're just not going to do it. If the goal was what Mercari had said originally was to attract more sellers and to attract more merchandise, come up with some kind of a plan to either reduce the fees to sellers or run a program where X dollar amount or X number of transactions per month, per week, whatever, per quarter are free, or once you achieve a certain amount of sales, your fees are reduced. Or once you achieve a certain number of listings, your fees are reduced. There are a number of ways that you could entice sellers who are, again, in my opinion, legitimately the ones that are absorbing these costs to list more items or to become more active on these sites. Moving these fees to buyers, in my opinion, I said it back in March and I stand by it, was not the way to go with this. And I think these firms are now seeing that that is in fact the case. If you can let me know in the comments down below, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify, what you think of that. But this has been, I said it on one of Liz's posts on Facebook, this has been a disaster for these sites to this point. So continuing on, some sellers weren't thrilled with the change, believing it may cause even more confusion for buyers. One said, "What does Mercari think this is going to accomplish? I realize the total amount doesn't change, but as a seller, it's a ridiculous move and it doesn't do sellers any favors." Others said they thought it was an improvement, but might be too little too late or might not make much of a difference to reverse the trend of dropping sales. "I got this on desktop," one said, for whatever reason, got a pop-up saying I'm seeing prices with fees included as part of a beta rollout, again, which runs counter to the argument that was made on this show by Mercari that transparency in this transaction was key. It should have always been like this, in my opinion, with shipping included in the price as you're scrolling. And you look at a listing on eBay, eBay has tons of problems. I get it. But when you look at an actual item page, it has the price and then what the shipping is going to be. It is clear what it is. And it's going to be very interesting to see, given all of this pushback, what they decide to do over in the UK, where we talked about a couple of weeks ago. They have announced that private sellers are not going to pay fees, but that there is a buyer fee coming down the pike in 2025. I wonder if this will give eBay pause in rolling that half of the equation out. Again, if your goal is to increase sales through increasing the number of buyers and the number of items, making it as seamless and easy as possible for all parties involved to list, sell, and complete a transaction at the lowest possible fees where you can make money, is the way it makes sense. As I talked about with Max last week when we were talking about book selling on Whatnot, you can sell more items at a slightly less margin, or you can try to sell more items at or less items at a slightly higher margin. Both of those things will work. And these programs appeared to be geared towards selling more items, maybe with the same margin. And that is probably the thing that you cannot do because everybody has perceived it, particularly over on Poshmark, as a cash grab. Maybe it'll help with sales. I doubt it though. Mercari needs to go back to the old tried and tested method where sellers pay the fees and no withdrawal fee. And again, if you want to entice us, lower the fees, roll out some kind of program where we can get discounted fees or a fee cutoff. There are many ways to do it, but this was not it, in my opinion. My Mercari sales have been non-existent, the writer said. Since they changed it, my sales are 100% eBay now. This time last year, I was getting almost equal amount of sales between Mercari and eBay. It's crazy. As I've talked about, have not had that experience. My Mercari sales have been fairly consistently inconsistent, but on balance, if I look at a total month, they're about the same as they were before the change. So it hasn't affected me incredibly, but I know a lot of sellers have really taken a hit on this. It's also causing confusion, it says, among sellers due to an apparent glitch in how offers are now being displayed. The change has prompted some to wonder if Mercari is bringing back seller fees because it shows the amount the seller would earn if they accepted offer, but it would be less than the amount being offered, like in the example that's going to be shown here, where the seller was told they would earn $10.49 if they accept an offer of $12.75. And you can see on the screen, offer from Sparkle Sales, $12.75, you earn $10.49, which is the way it used to look previously. This may have to do with the fact that those fees were actually being baked in to the price. So now it's not transparent, really, to the seller why the amount is less. You used to know it's just because you were paying the fee. Well, now in this beta program, that fee being paid by the buyer would make the sale price look higher and the amount you're being paid out look lower. Strange. And again, needlessly complicated for everyone involved. In another Reddit post, some confirmed they received the full amount of the accepted offer price, suggesting the issue may just be a display glitch. Sold a number of things since they removed seller fees. I know they aren't charging seller fees, the writer said. So when I went to accept this $18 offer, I was confused with a note that said you will earn $14.98. Is it something Mercari has just not updated on their site? And why $14.98? It doesn't even match up with the old fee. Update, I accepted it, and it looks as though I will still make the full $18. This writer said, sounds like they may be planning on switching things up though, or it could be just a mistake. It certainly wouldn't be the first time. The article continues that an update on Mercari resulted in unintended glitches, and some users say they believe the technical issues on the site have only gotten worse since a mass layoff in June, which is also something I asked David about and was told that that was not the case. But we, again, anecdotally, continue to see significant problems over on Mercari. So, man, that's a long, we're 20 minutes into this thing, 25 minutes into this, and it's just insanity. I don't know what else to say. This whole thing going back to March, none of it has really made sense to me and continues to not make sense. And we're seeing now that these platforms may also be realizing that these changes were not for their best benefit or interest. And it's going to be really interesting, especially with Mercari, who is 6 or 7 months into this now, if they decide to roll these things back, how it works and what the recovery time frame is. Because now you've got to, again, re-educate a bunch of people about how the thing works. And you've got to try to woo back all of these people that you've spent the last 6, 7 months running off your site because of this. Poshmark, to their credit, at least, has recognized very, very quickly that this is a potential problem and is, at least they say, they are in the process of taking a look at it. If they make a move now, there will be some reputational damage. There will be some trust probably broken. There's a long, long letter to the editor over on Value Added Resource from a longtime Poshmark seller that talks about just that fact. There is some reputational damage that will have to be recovered, but there's not probably significant buyer damage yet on Poshmark because it's only been a couple of weeks. So if they reverse course or make some appropriate changes quickly, it may not have the impact on them. But Mercari is really going to be behind it, in my opinion. Speaking of bad news, Etsy made an announcement very quietly this week that has caused, again, a lot of controversy. Etsy has announced big changes to their support for third-party shipping integrations, which comes on October 21st, which is just a couple of days from this recording, giving sellers less than a week to make adjustments or alternate shipping plans. From that date, a new label integration for U.S. sellers who need full access to automatically import and export shipping-related data will only be able to do so through two sites, Shippo or ShipStation. That's it. If you use any other third-party service for shipping, integrated shipping with Etsy, importantly, this is going to be for new integrations, not existing ones, but we'll get into that in a minute. So if you use a site like Pirate Ship, it's going to be a problem. Other providers like Pirate Ship, speaking of, may still be able to connect to your Etsy shop, but will not be able to access shipping addresses, submit tracking numbers, or mark items as shipped. It will require a manual entry for those actions instead. Another one, I commented when this originally posted on Facebook. I assume, I may be wrong in this, but I assume there is some sort of contractual tie-in between these two platforms, Shippo and ShipStation in Etsy, where there is some sort of agreement, maybe a little financial incentive, and Etsy is making it more difficult for their sellers to complete basic transactions in the way the seller wants to, in the chase of maybe a couple of pennies a transaction. I don't understand why these sites, again, I'm going to go on a rant. I'm on one today. These sites are nothing without sellers and, of course, without buyers. We talked about a few weeks ago how this is like a three-legged stool, and all of these legs need to be the same length. They all need to be in some sort of balance, or the whole thing gets really wobbly. And all of these sites over the last 6 months have really, to be frank, have done nothing but make it more difficult for everyone involved to participate. They've made it more difficult to know how much money you're making. They've made it more difficult to do research. They've made it more difficult to ship at every turn. And probably what makes it worse is that they push a lot of these things as to be beneficial to buyers and sellers, when those of us who are using the sites know when these things are announced, let alone when they're implemented, that they are not actually improvements. Again, I hate to rant on this stuff, but man, oh man, this one is just ridiculous. The announcement said it was just added into part of their Q&A section of their terms of use for sellers shipping from the U.S. as of October 21st. Shippo and ShipStation are the only third-party shipping apps which, when integrated into your Etsy account, will automatically import and export all shipping-related data. They do point out, if you are a U.S. seller and you've integrated a third-party shipping service other than that before October 21st, these services will continue to function as usual, with shipping data being automatically imported and exported. So if you are, like me, a user of Pirate Ship and your integration is set up, it will continue to work as it has, with an important caveat that we will get into here in a minute for sellers. I just read that. I'm not reading that again. Etsy says, again, if you are a seller using some other service and it's integrated, you can continue to do so. But that exception may not work in the future, as sellers need to be aware of the possible costs involving using Shippo or ShipStation and the necessity sometimes to reintegrate your services. She says, while Etsy says that existing integrations with other platforms will continue to work, anyone who's ever used label integration knows that software updates sometimes break integrations and may eventually require reconnection. I can tell you from personal experience, probably twice a year, I have to reintegrate Etsy with Pirate Ship. And the way this is set up now, my assumption is that once that integration disconnects, once Pirate Ship, for whatever reason, a software update or some sort of glitch, disconnects, when you go to reconnect it, even though you had been set up previously, it will recognize it as a new integration and the new program terms will apply and none of that data will transfer. After October 20th, according to what they're saying, that will only work for those two services, Shippo and ShipStation. It's important to note, Pirate Ship is free to use, while Shippo is only free for the first 30 labels a month, which is not even 2 days worth of shipments for me. and ShipStation's lowest tier provides 50 labels a month for $9.99. So whatever deal Etsy is cutting with these two companies, the writer says the real cost is being downloaded onto sellers yet again. Etsy labels, of course, are still free. You can just use their labels, but Pirate Ship's international labels are generally cheaper than Etsy's, especially if you're using their simple export rate. And again, for a seller like me who sells on multiple platforms, having everything integrated into one shipping center so I can do all of my labels at one time and print one scan sheet instead of 2 or 3 just makes my life as a seller easier, which is, to be fair, again, something those sites should be trying to accommodate. We are a equal partner in this thing. And yet again, at every turn, we're being punished. The move is likely part of Etsy's recent push to encourage sellers to provide cheaper shipping to help attract and retain buyers during difficult economic times, including making shipping cost a factor on the site in search ranking algorithm, which is something we've talked about as well. Interestingly, Pirate Ship. Let me go back, actually. It was published at the top of this article. I had it in a separate tab, but Pirate Ship is not taking this laying down. They sent out an email to users that read, "We've always prided ourselves on making shipping as simple as possible for small businesses." Hey, what do you know? Exactly what I'm talking about. Make it simple for sellers, especially when it comes to integrating with platforms like Etsy. Thousands of shippers depend on Pirate Ship's integration with Etsy to ship their orders every day. Unfortunately, Etsy just surprised us with an unexpected change that will limit this functionality beginning Monday, October 21st. So today, when most of you are probably listening to this, Etsy has said they will remove the ability for shipping software like Pirate Ship to access your order shipping addresses, submit tracking numbers on your behalf, or mark items as shipped automatically. They say connections that were made before Monday will continue to function as usual, but since existing connections sometimes require reauthorization, it's unclear if you will be able to continue importing orders from Etsy in the future. If it needs to be reconnected or you want to connect your other Etsy shops to Pirate Ship, you need to do it. In this case, you needed to do it yesterday. By the time this publishes, it's going to be too late, unfortunately. They continue, and this is interesting. This change came without any notice to Pirate Ship, and we're just as surprised and frustrated as you probably are. We know how important efficiency is for running your business and realize how much manual work Etsy's decision may create for you. What did we just talk about not 10 minutes ago? Transparency and communication. They didn't tell anybody. They just decided to do this, and Pirate Ship, I assume, found out the same way everybody else found out, through a press release. No connection, and importantly, please know that we're actively attempting to contact Etsy to understand why they did this and try to restore the effortless service you deserve. But unfortunately, Etsy has not responded to any of our outreach. Again, no communication, no transparency. No partnership, no feeling of responsibility to sellers to make our lives easier or more efficient. They just decided to do this and did it and didn't tell anybody, and now don't want to talk about it. It's been a very frustrating week in the reselling news, my friends. It is just crazy to me. More problems over at Etsy. We've been talking about this one for a little while. They have bungled the Colorado delivery fee implementation, and now sellers cannot cancel orders from the state. Etsy announced last month that they would finally begin collecting and remitting Colorado delivery fees, retail delivery fees, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But sellers say the company has bungled the implementation, now leaving them unable to cancel orders from that state. The article says the odds of a smooth transition were already not in Etsy's favor, considering they're over 2 years late in complying with their legal obligations as a marketplace facilitator. The Colorado retail delivery fee was passed and went into effect in July of 2022. So way late. The current fee is 29 cents per order shipped into the state, and it appears, unlike eBay, which we've talked about, Etsy is at least correctly showing that fee stated separately from regular sales tax. However, in setting checkout up correctly to comply with that requirement, Etsy seems to have created a different problem. Sellers say they're unable to cancel orders from Colorado if needed because the 29-cent delivery fee is not refunded along with the rest of the order, leaving an open balance on the order that prevents the cancellation from being completed. Let me know if you've run into this. I haven't tried to cancel an order on Etsy in quite some time, so I've not come across this, but it is when you go to process a cancellation, the software, this is on their end. There's really nothing you can do about it. Should go through line by line everything that was charged. So the selling price of the item, any appropriate discounts that were applied, sales tax, shipping, and this fee. And for some reason in the software flow, the Colorado retail delivery fee has not been captured in the cancellation portion of this. So it ends up you can cancel the order, leaving this 29-cent balance, which does not then allow the cancellation to be completed. Let me know if you've run across this. I assume that's probably a big stretch, given the way the rest of this newscast has gone today. I would have to hope that this is a fairly easy fix for Etsy to go into the return software workflow and just add in that it needs to capture this extra line item for sales from Colorado, but who knows? eBay is making a change to the they're introducing dynamic target daily budget for promoted listings priority cost per click campaign. So this is the campaign where you're paying for people to actually click your item, not the standard program where you only pay a fee if they make a purchase. This is the cost per click, where previously you set like a daily budget and eBay would run the ads for you up to the point where you hit your budget and then it would stop. Rather than having a fixed cap, they're now doing what they're calling dynamic target daily budget. They're making a change into seller budgets for promoted listings priority, which is the cost per click, promising more flexibility and matching ad spend to demand, but will sellers maintain the same level of control over maximum ad costs? My reading of this, and we're going to get into it, is that yes, this will not allow you to overspend over the course of a week, but it is going to limit and out of your control, limit potentially your daily spend. If you want an even flow throughout the course of a week of promoted listing clicks, this program is going to eliminate your capability of doing that, which is not necessarily a bad thing, which we'll get into. But it's a situation where as we get into this, you will see they have taken control of this to some extent out of your hands. When the first cost per click ad product was introduced by eBay back in 2021, which was called Promoted Listings Advanced at the time, the budget settings were a straightforward maximum daily amount. And once that amount was reached on any given day, as I just said, the ads would turn off for the rest of the day, and then they would just start up again the next day to run until and unless that budget was hit. Then in 2023, they introduced what they called smart targeting, which allowed sellers to set it and forget it, while eBay managed bid and keyword optimization. So the rate that you paid for any individual click could vary, and the keyword that was used could be selected by eBay on your behalf, which in theory could lead to a little bit better targeting for you, but again, took that little bit of control out of your hands. Even with smart targeting, the only budgeting option at the time was to set a maximum cost per click and a static flat daily total ad spend. So if you didn't want to spend more than whatever, a penny per click and $10 a day, that was how you set up your campaign, and eBay just ran it. That, my friends, is about to change. They are announcing daily budgets, which will be changing to targeted to help maximize sales potential, with the actual daily cost per click ad spend changing dynamically depending on demand. And this goes into effect on November 6th of this year. They said, eBay, that is, said, we're making some updates to our promoted listings program that will give you more flexibility over your advertising budget while maintaining control over your spend. The change, effective November 6th, impacts all advertising campaigns leveraging the priority campaign strategy. Starting soon, we're moving from a fixed daily budget to what they call a target daily budget. This means you'll set the average daily amount you'd like to spend for your priority campaigns to help maximize the sales. Here's what's changing. More flexibility. Instead of being locked into a set daily cap, you'll have a target budget that can be used more flexibly throughout the week. Match your spend to demand. On days when more people are visiting eBay, your campaign can spend up to double your target daily budget. This helps make sure, they say, you don't miss out on those extra sales opportunities while keeping your spending in check day to day. You can still maintain control, they say, over your weekly spending, as it won't exceed 7 times your target daily budget unless you make changes during the week. Why this matters. This update allows for dynamic allocation of your budget throughout the week, giving you a better chance to boost visibility and sales by adjusting your spending to match when potential buyers are the most active. So what they're saying essentially is, if you set a target of whatever, $5 a day, and eBay is experiencing super heavy traffic on that day, they can, on your behalf, spend up to $10 that day to run your ads in front of this influx of additional traffic. Then in days later in the week, when in theory there might be a little less traffic, it will run less ads, so that at the end of the week, again, if your target is $5 a day, you will not have spent more than $35. You may spend $10 on 3 days and $5 across the other 4 days. So it's not going to be evened out. If that was your plan, sorry, that's not going to work anymore. It is going to try to maximize your exposure on days where they indicate that they have the most traffic. Of course, the idea behind this would be, and again, I'm going to put my cynic's hat on again, early in the week, eBay says you got a lot of traffic, so we're going to double your spend, and 90% of your budget, your target budget for the week, is spent by Wednesday. You can go in midweek and make an update. You can change your daily target so that it can spend more throughout the rest of the week, and eBay can run more ads and collect more fees. Is that too cynical of me? And it may work. I don't use this program, so I don't know if it works really well at all. But it's clearly, it is presented as a way to capture more traffic and to capture more clicks, which it undoubtedly will within the narrow confines of what they're defining as a busier day. But it is going to limit you then throughout, in theory, the rest of the week. This change puts eBay more in line with other popular cost-per-click ad solutions, including Google Ads, which uses a 30-day time frame. Excuse me. eBay goes on to explain this: some days you may not reach your budget, and other days you may exceed it, again by up to double, but it will not go over 7 times your daily budget for the week unless you make that change. Your campaign, they say, will optimize spend based on a variety of factors, including your ads' relevance to the marketplace traffic and buyer behaviors. This means that on some days you may not reach your target daily budget, and others you may exceed it, again by up to double. This update will also eliminate the worry of overspending for the week by keeping overall costs within your desired budget. So again, they're saying if you've got $5 a day, the total week will not be more than $35 ad spend, even though you may spend up to double on any single given day. Rest assured, your total spend for the week will not go over 7 times your daily target unless you decide to change it. Your total spending for the week is Sunday through Saturday, and it will be capped at an amount equal to your daily target multiplied by 7, which is what I just explained. The example they gave is if your daily target is 12, your total weekly spend will not exceed $84. $12 for each day of the calendar week. Though again, on any single given day, you could spend up to $24 to try to capture that traffic. There is nothing sellers need to do to opt in to target daily budgets. eBay, as they are often known to do, will simply automatically switch all active promoted listings priority campaigns to this method starting November 6th. But as this article points out, that also means, unfortunately, sellers will not be able to opt out. This program is going into place. This is how the program is going to work, and you can essentially like it or leave it. This is how it's going to work. No opt-out. You cannot run your ads in the old way. It's this way or the highway. Let me know what you think of that if you are a promoted listings priority user. Another change, this was actually announced a couple of times previously, but it just popped up in eBay's news again. eBay 1099K is going electronic by default, and if you want paper, you need to opt back in. eBay, essentially, they re-announced this that 1099K forms for all sellers who meet the applicable thresholds will be defaulted to electronic delivery only on October 31st of this year. So again, if you want to opt out of electronic only, you got to go in. You got to put forth the effort to go in and make a change. Even if it was set up that way before, they're changing it to electronic. And if you want it on paper, you have to put forth the effort to go back and fix it. Sellers who still wish to receive a paper copy will need to go back into their settings after October 31st. So there's no point doing it now. You got to wait until the change is made, because if you do it now on October 31st, it's just going to change anyway. You'll need to make that change before December 31st if you want it to apply for this year. So you got a couple of months to make the change. As a reminder, they say, we're required to issue 1099K sellers who meet reportable criteria for gross payouts from eBay sales during a given calendar year. The form is issued by January 31st, the following calendar year. When it becomes available, sellers are notified by email and can easily and immediately download the electronic form 1099K. Only sellers who meet gross payouts from eBay sales criteria will be issued a form. After October 31st, you can update your delivery preference to receive a paper form 1099K in addition to your electronic delivery. So you're going to get that either way. In order to receive it for this tax year, you'll need to update it by the 31st of December, which is, of course, the end of the tax year. This was added into their terms of service some time ago. Liz notes that she had concerns that it could make it easier for fraudsters to get away with creating eBay accounts using stolen identity information, which, of course, has been a problem on the platform. She says in 2022 alone, she verified almost 80 instances of 1099Ks being received for over $750,000 in sales made through fraudulent accounts created using stolen identities. The victims had often never used eBay as a buyer or seller and were completely unaware of an account using their name, address, and in some cases, obviously, social security number, because that's how 1099Ks are generated, even existed until they received this 1099 form in the mail. Making 1099K forms electronic by default means identity theft victims will no longer get that notice in January, which at least would have given them a few months to notify eBay, law enforcement, and the IRS to try to proactively handle the situation before taxes are due. Instead, these innocent victims will likely file their taxes as normal, not even realizing that the IRS has been provided false documents by eBay showing tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars in income associated with their taxpayer information until they get an audit or the IRS demands they pay additional tax, interest, and penalties on income they never received. So again, I understand why eBay would want to do this. It's going to be a cost-saving measure. I'm one of those. I do everything electronically. I have not written an actual check for anything, and I couldn't tell you how long. Everything I do is electronic. If the internet ever goes down, I am at a total loss. My entire life is essentially online at this point. But the lack of these forms going out is a potential problem for, again, this what I assume is a small percentage of total users, or in some cases, even non-users of the site. But for those individual users, it could represent a significant burden. Last thing in the news, Walmart is amping up their New York Comic Con presence amidst the collectibles category push. This one is interesting, primarily because of how many ex-eBay people are involved in this. Walmart Marketplace is making their presence felt at New York Comic Con, leveraging new Walmart Resold program to offer resellers the opportunity to participate in CollectorCon action for the first time, with pre-orders, exclusive drops, and events throughout the convention. Walmart Resold, as we talked about, launched back in August, clearly aimed at taking market share from eBay by allowing third-party sellers to list used electronics, fashion, auto parts, and more, with a particular focus on collectibles. As part of the program, Walmart introduced a new dedicated collector shop, allowing sellers to offer pre-orders of sought-after collectibles and enticing sellers, eligible sellers, with 0% commission fee through October 31st in toys, media and music, trading cards, comic books and books, sports, memorabilia, and coins. Walmart's foray into the trading cards and collectibles market and their marketing and outreach efforts around New York Comic Con highlight an interesting trend in talent acquisition for the company. For example, Bob Means left his position at eBay last year to join Walmart as General Electronics Manager, excuse me, Toys and Seasonal. Means' official title was Vertical Merchandise Director, but most people knew him as the face of eBay's trading cards, toys, and collectibles efforts, often appearing at luxury or at industry events and a frequent guest on hobby-related podcasts and blogs. Excuse me, I had to take a drink there. He was also the point man for eBay's Vault, which has since been sold to PSA Collectors Universe as part of their deal to acquire Golden Auctions, and of eBay's live streaming sessions. GM Collectibles, Mayank Hygela, invited New York Comic Con attendees to stop by the Walmart booth to hear more about the company's commitment to the category with a special call out to that 0% selling fee. She was a GM Collectibles at eBay, overseeing development and execution for this critical multi-billion-dollar market segment that's been a keystone of eBay's high-value buyer-focused vertical strategy, but left the company to join Walmart earlier this year. Senior Director of Business Strategy, Walmart Marketplace, Cole Perkins, also took to LinkedIn to connect with NYCC attendees, sharing a post from a Senior Business Development Analyst, Antonio Cox. Interestingly, Perkins was previously head of business development at eBay before leaving to join Walmart earlier this year. And as you might guess, Cox is also a recently departed eBayer, previously managing enterprise accounts and new business development for collectibles and the eBay Vault. This is about half of the article, and there continues to be a long list of former eBay executives who are essentially running Walmart's collectibles category. So they are not only targeting eBay in terms of trying to take business from them, they are targeting their C-suite, their executives and their directors and VPs to make their business competitive. I guess my hope for Walmart, if you're going to root for somebody in this thing, would be that these people have learned from all of the mistakes that we've just kind of been talking about over the last hour that eBay and the other platforms have made, and perhaps they create Walmart's marketplace in a way that does not have those problems. That may be overly optimistic of me, but man, what a crazy, crazy week of news. Let me know in the comments how you feel about any or all of this. Again, not to belabor the point, most of what is going on here is to the detriment of sellers or buyers or both, maybe to some small gain to the platforms. But I think on balance, over the long term, this is all negative for these platforms. So let me know what you think of that. And while you're thinking about that, let's get into this What Sold segment. I don't have actually a ton of stuff here this week. I think there might be 7 or 8. It's not, it was a weird week. If you follow me over on Instagram at Galaxy CDs Rocks, I had, I think only 54 listings that sold on eBay last week. So it was a particularly rough week for me on eBay. Fortunately, however, I did 34 listings sold across 3 other platforms, Mercari, Etsy, and now Whatnot. Whatnot continues to be an ongoing experiment for me. If you didn't catch my interview with Max, Common Ground Finds, on Wednesday, there's some really interesting information there from Max, so go back and check that out. But I'm learning my way around Whatnot. I've now done 4 sales over there. The 4th sale, the one I did on Friday, was by far my most successful so far. So things seem to be moving in the right direction. We'll see how that goes as we go forward. My plan, as I talked about last week, I think, is to at least maintain a presence twice a week, most weeks at least at a minimum, on Whatnot through at least the end of the year, and see kind of where it goes, how it grows, what kind of margins I'm able to make. It's clear to me from discussing it with Max and from what I see so far in my own experience that you're absolutely making a trade of increased sales velocity at the expense of margin potential, but that may be a trade-off that makes sense for many businesses. So I will definitely keep you apprised of how that is going. If you want to follow me over there, it is at Galaxy CDs Rocks, like everything else. So let's get into some of this sold stuff. This sold on eBay. Another one of these old yearbooks, Good Samaritan Hospital School of Nursing Victorian Yearbook from 1974 from Cincinnati, Ohio. I had this listed, I think, for like $25.99, something like that. I sent out an offer to a watcher and sold it for $22.39 plus shipping. The buyer's total was $29.44, including tax. I paid $367 in fees, $206 in promoted listings general fees, $538 to ship. My cost of goods sold for this bad boy was $2, so my total cost $14.78. I made $14.66 in net profit. Next up, a paperback book, part of a big lot of religious books I picked up. Gosh, I think late in the winter. God, My Father, Words of Inspiration by Father Joseph Kentenek from 1977. This was a trade paperback in pretty good condition. Had it listed, I believe, for $29.99. Sent out an offer and sold this for $26.39 plus shipping on eBay. The order total, including tax, $33.58. I paid $4.92 in fees, $2.35 in ad fees, 50 cents cost of goods sold. This did ship ground advantage, so I saved a little bit on the shipping. My total cost, $14.76. Net profit, $18.82. I talk about religious books. I feel like pretty much every week here. They do well. I see a lot of sellers also over on Whatnot that are doing shows and sales specifically for religious and vintage religious books. So it is a category that if you're not in, you might want to consider, particularly if you're a bookseller. Another one that I do well in, kind of old textbooks. Controlled Thermonuclear Reactions, a hardcover with its dust jacket from 1960 by S. Gladstone and R. Loveberg. The dust jacket was in pretty rough condition, but this was a fairly hard to find textbook. This sold over on eBay for full price, $26.99 plus shipping. The order total was $34.74. I paid $507 in regular fees, $243 in the promoted listings fee, $613 to ship. Cost of goods sold. This was part of a big lot of books I bought for 91 cents a piece. So my total costs, $16.16, leading to a net profit of $18.58. Another old textbook from 1948, The Internal Combustion Engine by Taylor and Taylor. It was a revised edition, first printing hardcover that had all kinds of charts and graphs, a really interesting piece on the mechanics and the engineering of internal combustion engines. Listed and sold on eBay for $35.99 plus shipping. The order total was $44.78. I paid $643 in fees, $313 in ad fees. This was from the same lot as the thermonuclear book that we just had, 91 cents cost of goods sold. So my total cost, $19.26. Net profit, $25.52. Again, I talk about all the time, this is a category. I can walk into a sale almost always on the last day of the sale, and there'll be tons of old textbooks sitting on the shelf that don't look like they've been touched. And some of them can bring, again, these are not $100 sales, but if you do 20, 30 of these a week or whatever, it adds up pretty well. Another old book this was part of a big estate buyout that I did at the end of a sale. Toys of a Lifetime by Arnold Gingrich. It was a signed first edition illustrated hardcover from 1966. I had it listed for, I believe, $42.99. I received an offer of $38, which I went ahead and accepted. This sold through eBay's international shipping program. This one was going to the UK, so there was no sales tax. The order total, $43.38. I paid $624 in fees, $3.04 in ad fees. I paid $538 to ship this to eBay's international shipping center. 54 cents cost of goods sold. Total cost $15.20. Net profit $28.18 for Toys of a Lifetime. Hardcover in its dust jacket. A little bit of wear and discoloration on the dust jacket. A little bit of tanning of the pages, but not too hateful overall. I talk about all the time, I don't hesitate to list books in slightly subpar conditions. I just try to price them accordingly. I was priced under market on this book and sold it for a pretty good lick from an original cost of goods sold of just 54 cents. Two more old yearbooks. These were both from Ohio and went to someone who's currently living in North Carolina. So this was interesting. Urbana High School Tower from 1957 from Urbana, Ohio, and the Graham High School Echo from 1959 from St. Paris, Ohio. Again, yearbooks are a category that are slow movers at times, but generate, for me, at least in the volume that I do them, pretty consistent sales. It's 1, 2, 3 a week or more. These two make it 3 already this week in this category. The grand total for these two was $49.98 plus shipping. The customer paid a total of $61.19. I paid seller fees. Not to harp on that. That's part of the cost of doing business. $7.56 plus $3.27 in ad fees. Cost of shipping was $6.76. These did go out ground advantage for a little bit of a savings. My cost of goods sold on these was $2 a piece, so $4 total. My total cost $25.74, $35.45 net profit. I talked about some of these books. It was either last week or 2 weeks ago. Some books I picked up at an estate sale from 1919 and 1920 that were Michelin illustrated guides to the battlefields of World War I. This was the Americans in the Great War. This was a 3-volume set, hardcovers in their dust jackets. The dust jackets had pretty significant wear. One of them, both flaps were actually completely detached. They were present, they were in the books, but they were not attached to the dust covers anymore. So these were actually in modestly rough condition, but they're very, very difficult to find, particularly in a complete set. I was lucky enough to find a set of these. I had them listed for $74.99. I received an offer of $64. I was into them for $2.30 some cents a piece. So I went ahead and took that offer. The customer's total with tax and shipping was $76.17. I paid $10.65 in fees, $5.33 in ad fees, plus my $6.13 to ship. $7.41 was my total cost of goods sale for these 3 books. So my total costs were $35.56. My net profit, $40.61. And that, my friends, is the end of a pretty short What Sold segment this week. Again, this was a particularly long episode because there was just so much going on, and clearly I had thoughts about what was going on. I continue to harp on this, and I will continue to do so. We all need to work together. All sellers need to work together to maintain some pressure on these platforms, whether it be through social media, direct contact, through interviews with them, and challenging their notions about how reselling should work. As many sellers have said on many occasions, it is very clear that at this point in the game, most of these sites are being run by people who do not use them on a daily basis, either as buyers or sellers. That was not the case back in the day, and that's not to say that things were perfect back in the golden days of eBay, but it was really obvious at that time that the people in charge of the site were users of the site. They clearly, they were sellers, they were buyers, they were active on the site, and they knew our day-to-day struggles as people who use the site. That, to me, appears to have been lost, and the only way we can influence it is by being vocal about the things that we see and the things that we experience that are not going the way we want them to go. And this week was obviously a huge, huge list of things where sites have made decisions or are making decisions that run counter to what makes, for me, just good common sense. Making transactions as easy and seamless as possible for the other 2 legs of this reselling stool, buyers and sellers. Things that may look like, on paper, good moves for platforms do not necessarily work out to be that way if they have negative impacts on buyers or sellers, driving one or both off of your platform and either to another platform or off of the internet selling altogether. And I feel like the sooner these platforms realize this, the better their performance will be. Their obligation, as I talk about all the time, is to their shareholders. Most of these companies are publicly held. Poshmark notwithstanding, they were purchased by Naver, but even they're trying to recoup, obviously, their multi-billion-dollar investment in the company by making changes that on paper should make them more money. But if the net effect is that your user base declines, you don't make more money. You may make more money on one individual transaction, but if you lose one transaction for every 5 that you make, you're not making more money. It's just that simple. So I appreciate everybody who comes and listens to these rants, who shares them with others, who forwards these things on to people who might have some influence on some of these platforms. And to be fair, some of the platforms that I know are listening themselves. I know I'm just a guy in my basement, but I've run businesses. I'm running a business now. There are some things that are being missed that should not be. So as always, I thank you for spending, in this case, quite a bit of your time with me this week. If you got something out of this or just found it interesting, informative, or entertaining, please do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free, if you're listening to the podcast, to leave a review. We always appreciate seeing those as well. If you're not currently a subscriber to the YouTube channel or a follower of the podcast, I'd appreciate if you would join the Galaxian family and do that. Our next show will be Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, October 23rd, which is actually my birthday. I don't have anything particular planned. We'll probably just be over in the back cave doing some listing and having some general chit chat. We can talk about all the stuff that happened over the last week. That's kind of the plan. And then my next Whatnot sale will actually be probably on Friday, unless I decide to do a pop-up sale earlier. And that will be vintage science fiction for those of you who might be interested in something like that. With that, my friends, I'm going to take another drink of this coffee, and it's time to sell. Thanks, guys. You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.